Welcome to the agenda of the public workshop, City of Panama City, December 2nd. I'm glad y'all could make it. A little cold out there, but it's nice in here. We're going to start off the meeting today with an opening prayer from Josh Street. And then Michelle from Comcast is going to come to the mic and lead us in a pledge of allegiance. So could y'all please stand?
Bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the day, a wonderful Thanksgiving, and hopefully everyone had a great time with their family and friends. Lord, I just pray that you help our workshop go well tonight. God, guide us in all things, and in your name we ask it. In the name of Jesus.
Amen.
Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic that stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. Please be seated.
Mr. Mayor, if I may briefly, before we move into audience participation, I just want to flag that Commissioner Halligus is participating via Zoom. Nothing to vote on tonight in a workshop, but she will be here and engaged and willing to weigh in at times in accordance with the moderation of the meeting. We also have two representatives from FPL on as well via Zoom.
Very good.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you. We're going to start off the meeting a little out of order here. Mr. Zimmerman is going to talk about the discussion on underground utilities. And after we do that, we will move to audience participation. So, Mr. Zimmerman, can you move forward?
Thank you. I thought it'd be most appropriate to go ahead, Commission and those here at the workshop, to talk about first what we have in front of you as far as an ordinance. Then we do have a PowerPoint presentation to go through. But what the commission has considered twice at city commission meetings is a new ordinance. It's ordinance 3239. And the purpose of that ordinance is to amend and add a chapter to our code that requires pole owners to remove redundant utility poles, requires all new construction of residences and buildings to install underground electric utility and communications infrastructure, and requires all property owners to cooperate and comply with electric underground and conversion projects. So this is what we've been talking about as we look forward to the future. This commission had determined not long after Hurricane Michael that resiliency and reliability and safety would be served by having underground utilities, both primarily power utilities, but then also all other utilities when possible. This ordinance was first talked about, I believe, in October. There were some comments made by the industry at that meeting, and then a provision was added to the ordinance because there was some concern that maybe the state law had preempted this. We don't think it has at all. We think the city has the ability and the authority to legislate in this area, but we did add to the extent allowed by law. So then it came back up in November, I think it was 12th. And at that time, we went through the issues, and it was the final adoption hearing. And the commission determined, after hearing the input and request from the industry, primarily AT&T, Comcast, Florida Power and Light, to have a workshop. That's why we're here today. So today is going to go over a PowerPoint, answer any questions that we can, receive input. If there are questions we can't answer, we'll take them down and try to get answers to that. This comes back to the commission on December the 10th, which is a week from tomorrow. So that's what this workshop is about. Oh, here we go. Boy, that is small print, isn't it?
Wow.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, let me get it back to the beginning. I've got a printout for it.
It's right behind you too, Nevin.
Yeah.
You see a little better behind you.
But I'll just try to go with it and then also follow along on the printout that I have. You can tell a lawyer put that together because it's just, should have thought about that. So my apologies. But anyway, the summary, and I won't read it word for word because you received this in your packet, but this is a recap of where we are to date. We'll discuss the benefits of undergrounding versus above ground or overhead. We'll talk about our undergrounding strategy and that it's no cost to the city, residents, businesses, taxpayers under Florida Power and Light Storm Secure Undergrounding Program, or SSUP. We'll discuss that municipalities that require undergrounding, give examples, cities paying for undergrounding for a city-sponsored project. That is not what Panama City is doing, and the cost of those projects. We'll hear from the participants here at the workshop. We acknowledge that the ordinance and the rules may be counter to some industry interests, but we believe they protect city residents, businesses, and the future looking or the future proofing of the city. And no official action is required today. I'm trying. Where do I press it, Jerome? I mean, point it. It's not moving forward. Thank you. Benefits of the proposed ordinance. There we go. The proposed ordinance serves to express the policy of the city that it is establishing rules and regulations promoting a strategy to underground its electric and communications infrastructure citywide where possible and where appropriate. It's the next step in the city's efforts to provide the best services and conditions for people to work, live, and visit. And based on input from stakeholders and constructive comments provided, the ordinance for second reading has been amended to clarify certain recitals and provisions. This was attached to your agenda package, and all of this, the PowerPoint, the amendments to the ordinance were all provided also directly to those names I had with AT&T and Comcast and the industry and Florida Power. The ordinance has been amended to clarify a definition of new construction and other provisions consistent with state statute. We acknowledge that certain requirements or limitations set forth in the ordinance may not be for everyone, but that is a matter of policy or positional differences. It's not a matter of legality. In other words, we believe the ordinance is written is legal. There may be different policy issues you'd like to discuss, but as far as legality, we believe it's there. The city's first and foremost interest is protecting the infrastructure reliability for residents and businesses, and doing so at no or little cost, and planning for long-term storm occurrences. The benefits of underground utilities. Undergrounding is generally more robust and resilient to interruptions and outages. It reduces restoration times for homes, businesses, and communities so they can return back more quickly to normality. It reduces outages as far as street lights and street lamps, traffic lights and lamps. It reduces down power lines, creating a life-threatening situation. Locations critical to community functioning like hospitals, schools, lift stations, gas tanks, banks have power back much sooner. Power and communications for elderly, frail, and special needs in their homes, more reliable. Continued communication at home, offices, businesses. It upgrades communication systems to all fiber optic and next generation cable facilities. The aesthetics of the community are enhanced. There's likely increase in property values, and there's a site on that. And financial mitigation effect on housing and real estate development. So the city looks forward to being part of Florida Power's SSUP program and is looking forward to assisting any way that it can legally assist and from a matter of policy. The city's Public Works Department will provide input in cooperation with FPL where undergrounding makes sense. They'll provide this input. They do not dictate. The city Public Works Department is not saying where Florida Power will provide undergrounding, but they will be a partner and be looking at that from a city perspective. The benefits of undergrounding, it furthers the city's policies that are forward-thinking by removing unsightly lines. It squares with the city's role as city planning for the future or future-proofing. With the newest and best technology, it's a sustainable best practice, provides opportunities for the city to have the best possible electric and communications utility infrastructure to attract commerce and residents. Work will be conducted to fully protect trees, unique opportunity to upgrade the grid to provide more capacity, an ability to scope and coordinate work with other local infrastructure projects. And all this are some of the benefits of undergrounding. A relevant state statute, we won't go over this line by line, but the Public Utility Storm Protection Plan, Senate Bill 797, was adopted in 2019, and it's a mechanism to harden some portions of the electrical system while the utility recovers its cost of conversion. The utility can then add the capital improvements to its rate base. All projects are paid for by the general body of FPL's rate payers. This results in a Storm Secure Underground Program, or SSUP, presented to the Florida Public Service Commission. And there's a 10-year plan, and every 3 years one is submitted. Chapter 366.97 deals with redundant poles and transfer of ownership, and this is new legislation that was adopted in 2022. This legislation was supported by FPL, and FPL and other industry entities lobbied on the measure, taking different positions. I believe maybe AT&T took a different position than FPL on this particular statute. The legislation sets forth requirements for pole attaching entities to continue to locate their facilities on poles and address the right of pole owners to transfer ownership of poles they no longer utilize. Among other requirements, an attaching entity must remove its pole attachments from a redundant pole within 180 calendar days after receipt of a written notice from the pole owner requesting such removal. So if Florida Power, FPL, were to go to an undergrounding conversion project for a certain, let's say for a block, they, at some point in time, they'd give notice that a pole was redundant, and then whether it's Comcast or AT&T or whoever had a line on that would be obligated to remove it, or unless they have a contract as far as a power pole sharing agreement or something, then there might be a different result. So so what's included and what is not in the Florida Power and Light's SSUP? It includes the conversion of individual home and business service connections and the removal of electric wires and replacing them with underground electric equipment and transformers, pad-mounted transformers. FPL's plans and order of conversions are based solely on performance of lateral lines. That is, FPL would do the conversion work prioritizing the worst performing laterals, and over the course of a period of time complete the project for the entire city. It's a long-term project. SSUP does not include converting the main feeder lines throughout the city, leaving that infrastructure overhead and subject to different issues, but that is not, main feeder lines are not what is contemplated here. FPL has other plans to harden these existing overhead feeder lines system-wide. The next slide is the SUP program does not address conversion of the other infrastructure, phone and cable that co-locate on the poles, thus leaving that infrastructure overhead. However, that's where if a pole is redundant, that's where the statute can come in. The SSUP program by itself, without the benefit of the ordinance, does not remove poles because communications infrastructure entities equipment is co-located there and their lines would remain overhead, requiring the poles to connect the wires. So this is a situation where, in furtherance of Florida Power FPL's SUP program and decision to go underground, would give the ordinances there to assist when it's allowable under current law. And of course, it cannot interfere with an existing contract right. So what are just generally the pros of undergrounding? If I can get to that slide. The pros of undergrounding infrastructure. It's much more resilient to wind and weather. And I believe this decision in the discussions the commission has had for a long time is held by the commission. Even hardened above-ground facilities are prone to damage from wind-blown vegetation, flying debris. Undergrounding results in reduced outages from traffic lights and street lamps. It reduced down power lines, creating a life-threatening situation. Critical locations like hospitals, schools, lift stations will have power. Elderly, frail, and special needs individuals will have better protection. Given that telephone and cable lines, which include internet, are also buried, the likelihood of their disruption and being out of service is also minimized. The city has several overhead facilities that exceed the average age useful life than other areas of FPL's system. And the tree canopy and vegetation creates a two-step restoration process for major storm outages. Unfortunately, our tree canopy is not like it was prior to October 10th of 2018, but that is another issue. Once again, the pros of undergrounding. FPL's reliability reports to the FPSC show that over a 5-year period, its underground system significantly outperformed overhead lines in 3 of 4 measures of duration and frequency. In 2014, a year without any hurricanes or named storms affecting FPL's customer, the report showed on average the total minutes throughout the year out of power that overhead customers were without power for a period of 6 times longer than underground customers. Frequency of outages system-wide over the course of the year, overhead customers had more than 3 times as many service interruptions as underground. Also, average restoration time for affected customers. When an outage occurred, it took twice as long for the power to return for overhead customers than underground customers. Restoration time for last affected customer to completely resolve an outage for all affected customers after an outage event. It took an average 40 minutes longer for the last underground customer to be restored versus an overhead customer. And damaged lines sometimes are more difficult to locate for underground than overhead. So that is an issue that was pointed out there. So the pros of undergrounding continued. Panama City's desire to be a role model in history as progressive, forward-thinking city, long-term planning and future-proofing, and the need for local resiliency, aesthetics, community enhancement, property values. These are all reasons to go underground as far as to ultimately end up with that. Pros of undergrounding continued. Underground communications, fiber optic, and other cable is far more resilient than aerial above ground, up to 10 times more reliable and resilient to weather, physical interference, and provides improved signal quality and maintenance due to controlled environment. In the short term, that said, in the short term, aerial installation is more cost effective for communication providers than underground in the short term. This is a primary reason these companies seek to save money in the short term by deploying aerial fiber instead of agreeing to bury their fiber cables. Underground conversion disadvantages. Construction inconvenience. The use of directional boring has significantly reduced the construction impact on neighborhoods and effectively eliminates the need to disrupt and disturb existing trees, sidewalks, and other improvements in the area. So directional boring does assist in going underground without as significant disturbance. FPL works with property owners to mitigate these issues. Pad-mounted transformers, location, size, and aesthetic. There would be the location of transformers, which is typically in the front yard, in the swale right-of-way, for every 4 to 6 homes for easy utility access for maintenance and repair. Susceptible to flooding, ground-mounted equipment is more prone to storm surge, but significant advances and improvements mitigate this. The city would provide input based on its engineering recommendations to the appropriate electric utility and providers to address these issues. So whether or not an area goes underground will be dictated by engineering determinations primarily set by FPL. Not all areas will be underground. It all depends on the engineers and their analysis of the area. Cost to property owners imposed by the ordinance. For new commercial buildings, new subdivision, residents building new homes, or property owners rehabilitating their commercial buildings or homes above 50% of the value of these buildings, the city will require that all electric and communications infrastructure be underground. This is a cost of new construction borne by the property owner or the developer. If the property where such new construction is taking place is still served by above ground electric and communication, the property owner would only be converting their service connection and bearing lines located on their property up to the nearby transformer on the pole adjoining their property. The city envisions that when FPL eventually converts the lateral electrical distribution infrastructure adjoining a property from overhead to underground, that all infrastructure in the neighborhood, lateral distribution all the way to the individual home service connections, will be underground, cost to be borne under the SSUP program. When FPL eventually plans and implements its SSUP for its distribution infrastructure in neighborhoods across the city, dictated by the engineering analysis, property owners might have to address the relocation or replacement of plant materials, sod, bushes that cannot otherwise be worked around by FPL. That said, FPL works very closely with each property owner to mitigate these issues. And requiring utilities to be underground is not new in the state of Florida. Dozens of cities throughout Florida, including those in FPL service territory, require new construction by property owners and new subdivision developments to have all utilities and communications infrastructure installed underground. Nearly 45% of FPL's system is now underground, and that number continues to grow as new communities are built, as customers convert their service from overhead to underground through FPL's SUP initiative. Just a few examples of cities that require undergrounding for properties with new construction is Coral Gables, Golden Beach, and the town of Palm Beach. In Golden Beach and Palm Beach, each city initiated municipality-wide undergrounding that they paid for with general obligation bonds in the last decade. That said, long before Palm Beach began its citywide undergrounding conversion, the town had required all individual service laterals to be underground since 1982. In Coral Gables, a city where FPL has committed to convert all remaining lateral electric distribution infrastructure to underground under FPL's SUP program, Coral Gables requires the undergrounding of all electric and communications infrastructure where there is a new building construction. Local law consistent with what Panama City is contemplating with this ordinance. And based upon comments that the industry gave us, they had a good point. We needed a definition of new construction. That definition has been supplied in the revised ordinance that will be considered next week by the commission. And that new construction is required to be underground. And there's a negative definition in there too, that it does not apply to the replacement of power or communication lines. Undergrounding conversion properties, undergrounding conversion projects elsewhere in FPL's service area that's being paid for by the locality and its residents through general obligation bonds. So these are where the town or the city paid for it out of their own pockets. And that is Fort Lauderdale, I mentioned Golden Beach, Jupiter, Palm Beach, Sunny Isles, and the village of Key Biscayne. The typical cost to the taxpayers in this was $2,000 to $4,000 per year. I believe they had special assessments on some of these projects for 30 years. That's when the city, as a matter of policy, felt like it was critical to go underground for all the reasons that we've mentioned, and then paid for it, issued bonds, and then passed the cost, of course, on to the users or the citizens. The typical cost to cities of converting their FPL electric utility infrastructure from overhead to underground is $1 to $2 million per linear mile. This cost does not include conversion of communications infrastructure for phone and cable. But the issues as far as the city paying, these other cities paying for the undergrounding does not apply to Panama City, because Panama City is not doing a city-sponsored, city-paid-for conversion. Rather, the city, Panama City, looks forward to working with FPL to get prioritized for FPL's SSUP program. The next slide is really a chart, and this chart just talks about city-sponsored overhead to underground conversion projects and the fact that how expensive they are if the city were to do it on as a city project rather than utilizing the existing state law that allows us to assist and piggyback with it's a Florida FPL program through the SUP. Oops, went too far. Okay, the FPL Storm Secure Undergrounding Program is being implemented in municipalities throughout Florida. These are just a few examples where FPL is already undertaking the conversion of overhead to underground. Brevard County, Coral Gables, Fort Lauderdale, Fort Myers, Golden Gate, Nassau County, Okaloosa County, Pinecrest, Punta Gorda, Wellington are just examples. So we are not the first city that is looking at the new law, looking at this program that Florida Power is implementing. So that is really covers what kind of the new comments as far as covering this for the city commission in a workshop setting. You see in your material that was passed out, there is a red line that shows changes to the ordinance. They're not many, but they are based on some excellent comments from the industry. And one that I've already talked about is the definition of new construction. And just to point out that there is nothing in this ordinance that requires anybody to go underground, whether it's FPL, whether it's AT&T or Comcast. But there is a requirement that if there's new construction, that new construction would be underground. So, Mayor and Commission, those are my comments. There are a lot of comments, and I'd love to be quiet and sit back and listen to maybe comments from the public.
Well, thank you, Nevin. I think you did a good job of a whole lot of reading in there. Since we have some industry representatives, how about if I let them talk now? So Comcast is here, AT&T is here, and so is FP&L. FP&L, you want to start it off?
Oh, it's
Are you
is,
deferring to Monica?
okay, okay, we do have Monica.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Barnes is, Monica Barnes is General Counsel for FPL, and she provided a letter to me and with comments to the ordinance, and she's attending through Zoom.
Very good. Well, thank you. All right.
Ms. Monica, if you can hear us, if we can hear you, go ahead.
Yes. Good evening. I can hear you. Mayor, Commission, City Attorney, thank you so much for your for the introduction. Monica Barnes, should I state my address just for the record?
Yes.
Okay. Monica Barnes, Legal Counsel for Florida Power and Light Company, 700 Universe Boulevard, Juno Beach, Florida. We submitted comments last week. I have not had a chance to review the revised ordinance since that time. And I would like to review, but I think that we are pretty much in agreement here that under the storm secured underground protection plan, if what happens is FPL will submit that plan to the Florida Public Service Commission, and it has to be approved. If approved, then the cost will be absorbed by the customers. And you did an eloquent job of outlining some of the cities that have decided to implement their own undergrounding programs and those cities are bearing the cost. So I agree with everything that's pretty much been said. There are some other comments we made within the ordinance. One in particular, I would say, would be dealing with the feeder lines and the lateral distribution lines. That should be determined on a case-by-case basis, and you will need the input of an engineer to make sure that from a reliability and also a safety standpoint, that's something that can be done. And I have
Very good.
others
Well,
on my
thank
team
you.
that are in the audience. Okay, they can speak on that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Barnes. Does anybody else, let's see, we have Comcast representatives. Would one of you like to speak? Or AT&T?
A comes before C.
Ah,
Good evening, folks. My name is Eddie Thompson. I work with AT&T. I'm the Regional Director of External and Legislative Affairs. Thank you for having the workshop on this ordinance. Thank you for the changes that you have done on that, Mr. Zimmerman. Appreciate that. I still like to highlight some of the concerns that Florida Internet and Television had addressed. Mr. Zimmerman had done due diligence and sent all of y'all the remarks. So I hope y'all saw there. But there are concerns. I know it'd make it easy if it was just a policy difference because, we can argue policy all the time. But there are some issues that this ordinance does strike against Florida statutes. And therein lies the legality of the right-of-way issue where telecom has the right to be in the right-of-way, and local government is preempted from telling telecom companies what to do with their communication facilities. So this ordinance strikes against that. It also strikes against eminent domain. Again, it's given the authority that telecoms have with their telephone lines and communications network there, this ordinance strikes against there. And obviously, relying heavily on the pole attachment bill that FPNL and AT&T had fun with a couple of years ago doesn't give authority to any entity what to do with undergrounding or any. It just talks about pole attachments. Telecoms still have a legal right, even if a redundant pole is there. If that redundant pole is moved, they still have the right to put another pole right there. Back in there because of the legal rights of owning the right of way and the telecommunications. So that's our concerns we have with it. Again, thank you for the opportunity for the workshop. We just wanted to address those issues.
so if I could ask you in sort of layman's language, if FP&L takes the power off the pole and you still have telecommunications on a pole, you don't think you should have to take yours off?
Legally, we don't know, sir. It's property rights issue at that point, right? Because we own, what happens if, even if FPNL owned the pole, we would buy it back from them or buy it from them, and we would keep communications there if it fit our business plan. Not saying that's our plan, clearly not our plan. Our plan is to partner with communities to underground, but sometimes it's not feasible with our business plan in relying to what a community needs. If you look at Panama City Beach, I mentioned that with the CRA there, we work with them hand in hand, and we've underground all of the facilities. I think we're on phase 5 now or phase 4, I can't remember. So we work, undergrounding is not an issue with us. We underground all the time, especially with new development. So it's not a bigger issue with us with new homes and whatnot. But yes, if FPNL went underground, we would put it in our business model to do it. Obviously, we don't want to keep it there, but if it doesn't match, if it doesn't fit our business plan, then it would take longer to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. So you will work with the city
Oh yeah, of
and
course.
do the best we and you
Yes,
together
yeah,
can to get
yes,
it underground. But if
yes,
it
sir.
doesn't get underground, then we're gonna come to blows.
I will not.
Legal blows, maybe.
And again, it will not be me. I do not have the background for that, but it would be stronger conversations. Yes, sir.
I see. Okay, well, that's good. I'd like to know where we are.
Yes, sir.
Very good. Well, thank you. So, looking forward. I hope we can work with
Yeah,
you.
of course,
and
of course. Yeah, we love Bay County. We've done a lot. Y'all have done. We know y'all suffered a lot with hurricane. Again, like I mentioned, I know Mr. Nevin said to keep our comments to the ordinance. Again, we'll definitely going to work with the city and what we can do on redundant poles. I know that Comcast, and I'm sure Michelle will talk about it, have had plans and they're doing active. And as soon as they're done, I'm going to do all I can on my end to expedite it from on our side to get rid of the redundant poles, especially on 98. There's some really crappy ones I saw.
Do you do that lateral boring just like FP&L does? Is that how you get yours?
Wow, you're stretching my knowledge here. I know we do underground boring. Yes, sir. We definitely do that. And yes, we
I
do.
was just wondering how it happened.
It's pretty cool. I've seen it, but anyway, yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Anybody else up here want to ask him a question before we go to Comcast? All right. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Hello again. Michelle McGovern from Comcast, 1100 North Point Parkway, West Palm Beach, Florida, 33407, I think. I wanted to, I sent you all a memo with with our comments, and we received some feedback about the poles on 98, and just wanted to maybe walk you through a little bit. You know, FPL's SSUP program includes hardening and undergrounding, and so in some areas they're hardening their poles, and we're moving from the wood poles to the concrete poles, or from the former poles to the hardened poles, and that's our process. In fact, I gave you, based on our schedule with Florida Power and Light, where they're moving from one pole to a hardened pole, we follow behind. And the way it works is electric is on top, and then the utilities are underneath, and then we go one at a time, whoever's next. That's why sometimes you see a pole cut off at the top, because power already went, and now whoever's next to go just goes right over the pole. And so I gave you that schedule of where we are in following FPL's hardening project throughout the city. Those are the numbers. The 2,185 poles have been transferred in Panama City, in the city of Panama City, for Comcast. And we have 323 left for this year to complete. And so when Florida Power and Light decides, to Eddie's point, when Florida Power and Light decides to go underground or go to a hardened pole, we have a choice. We have a business decision to make. Do we stay on the pole where we already exist, or does it make sense for us to go underground right behind them? And as Eddie mentioned, that's just a business decision that we make, depending on the area, depending on the location. And so just really appreciate all the feedback that Mr. Zimmerman, that you took from us, particularly on the new construction guidelines. I think that's important. And we do that all over the state of Florida where there is new construction. We often will go underground. So not a difficult request. Sometimes when it's a business, we tend to underground. To a business anyway. So this is a little bit about our comments here. Appreciate that there isn't a requirement here to go underground because as we've mentioned, that's antithetical to state law. But looking forward to working with you on future hardening projects as you move forward.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. We're in audience participation also, so would any member of the audience like to come up and speak? Come to the microphone and give your name and address. We don't have a lot of participation. I guess they answered everything. Would any of the commissioners like to speak? I guess this is sort of like our first reading, and we're going to talk about it again, but does anybody, before we let the lawyer talk, does anybody else want to speak?
So, Mr. Mayor, I do have a question for the utilities. My concern was that FPL already had in its business plan a way to disperse the costs and make it minimal to the utility customers. And as I understand your presentations, you don't necessarily already have a plan or a fund like that. So what would your costs, I guess, to the homeowner, the business person, to go underground for your utilities?
Is this a question for the telecommunications?
Yes,
I thought
for-
that's what it was. Yeah.
Yes, for Comcast or AT&T,
Or both?
or yes.
Yes, so you're accurate in your question. FPL has a mechanism to help their capital expenses for underground hardening, and they petitioned the Florida Public Service Commission. They no longer, Florida Public Service Commission no longer regulates us. We got rid of that, I think, 20 years ago. So we don't have that opportunity to do that. So for us, that's leaning on what Michelle said and what I've said. Oh, that's why we keep calling it a business decision then, because we do have pockets of cap expense going around. We have projects all over. We spent billions of dollars in the state of Florida just in underground fiber. But those are predetermined 2 years in advance. And it's based off modules. And clearly, I'm not the accountant, so I don't know all the modules of why we do and where we do. But I know that we do that. And so it would eat into that. It's where the cost would come into. And there isn't a mechanism for us to pass it on to the customers other than raising rates, which it's fine. When we say, hey, just raise rates, but then you're in a competitive market and you're dealing with 2 or 3 other major telecom, especially on our side, that it keeps it less competitive if we're then required to do something outside of our business scope and outside of our interest.
So if I interpret what you're saying, it's not in your business interest just to give the consumer a separate bill for
I don't
underground.
even think there's a mechanism for that to happen. I wouldn't understand how we would do that. So no, I don't think that.
So you would raise their rate?
I would not. It would.
Maybe
I don't
you
know how
would,
that
but-
cost would come out. Honestly, I wouldn't know how it gets meted out somehow, right? I don't know how that goes down, but I know that it would alter our business interests and alter our business plans.
Maybe a clarifying question on the same subject. How do our rates compare to other areas in the country currently?
That's a great question. I could not answer it. I'll find out that. I don't know the answer to that. What I do know the difference between us and other parts is we no longer have a pass through of the communication service tax. That was in 20 years ago when we eliminated the need to go to the PSC for our rates. That was the bargain. Was listen, we won't go through here. Just the buyout for the local government was communication service tax given to the local entities. And I believe like 2023, Panama City and the manager could clarify, but I think he was getting like 1.5 million from the communication service tax. And that's across all platforms of cell phones and internet and whatnot there. So that's the mechanism of how, and ideally that's where I guess in theory, the money would come from would be the taxes that are already collected.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I figured out how much it was going to cost. Did you catch it?
It's going to cost something at some point, in some way.
Michelle mentioned it.
I agree. That's what it sounded like to me.
I'm so sorry, Mayor. Michelle mentioned last meeting she had where their cost for Comcast to do per mile. Ours is not around that. Ours is around 80 or 90,000. So that's what it would be a mile for us. Right? Is it-
Yeah, I mean,
And there are
approximately. It depends on the city, it depends on the,
Yeah, our actual cost of would be 350 times 80 or 90,000.
so just as a follow-up, so, it's not just FPL that's doing this hardening. It's a couple of other utilities in the state. And so we across the state have had to make a business decision how to follow them, right? And in some areas, we have gone underground at our own expense, where it makes sense, and in other areas we don't. And oftentimes that there's lots of factors involved. Are the poles that are already there, strong and able to sustain going forward, or does it make more sense for future growth for us to just go ahead and go underground in those areas, and understand that they have gotten permission to pass the cost on to their ratepayers. We have taken on the cost where we can, and if we decided to, and to Eddie's point, it would, we could make a decision to say, hey, we'll make a special, we're going to harden Panama City. And so, we're going to go ahead and jointly create a Panama City, charge to harden and to go underground in all of Panama City. It's not something I think we'd like to do. But if it's something that was interesting, certainly a conversation we could have. We are trying to do the best that we can. And as I mentioned in the last meeting, in some areas, undergrounding isn't beneficial. In Southwest Florida, after the storms, we were literally digging our plant out of the sand, in order to restore. And it took a long time to get those folks back up and running where they were underground. So, so we follow FPL where we can, and we harden where we can.
Not necessarily an easy decision then.
No, it's a business decision, right? It just like for you all, it's a business decision. And to Eddie's point, we do, our customers do pay into the CST, into the cable service tax, which is a fund that you all have access to, which could be used to be part of this project if you were so willing.
Okay.
How does that work?
You'd have to talk to your city manager, but
So it's something that the cable utilities have?
every one of our customers, in all those extra charges that you see in some of your bills, one of those is a cable service tax, which gets paid to the city or to the county where you live. And so that fund is there at the city's discretion to use accordingly.
It's basically rent for using our right of way for their business. Franchise fee, however you want to describe it.
Franchise.
Yeah.
But is available to us in an instance like this?
It's allocated in the general budget currently.
Right,
So
it is.
spent on various
no, we
projects that we
already
have.
collect.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
collective.
Okay.
We already-
Have it.
We already have it.
Already allocated that.
Right.
There's a question back there. Right.
So I'm Joe Sorcy, 2361 Foxworth Drive, Panama City. First, I'd like to thank and compliment the city for taking on this effort. I think it is really needed here in Bay County. I think it's very beneficial, safety and aesthetics. After Michael, every pole on 23rd Street was on the ground. I saw them. I drove over all the lines. We're not like South Florida with large sand piles that come up like Sanibel, some of those other places where you'd have to dig it out. But I think we need, and also I want to thank Florida Power's program, because partnering with the city and helping us get this accomplished is very complimentary. But for business decisions, we need AT&T and Comcast to step up. This Bay County is about to explode in population. Now's the time to get this program going. You guys will make it up in the long run. And I just think it would be a good investment as part of the cities that you, partner with, and get this done here in Bay County moving forward. So thank you all for all the efforts. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Nevin, you wanted to say something a little while ago before I cut you off. Did you have any, summarize what we've done here today?
I was kind of glad. I was glad you cut me off. No. We will take down these comments and obviously we will provide you with more information before next week. But like Mr. Thompson's comment, I believe we agree that, this ordinance will not impair any contract rights. So if AT&T or Comcast is a utility, they chose not to be a utility 20 years ago when they were no longer being regulated by the Public Service Commission, because every time that Florida Power wants to increase a rate, they have to go over to Tallahassee in front of the Public Service Commission and get permission. That does not apply to Comcast or AT&T. They raise rates to whatever they deem prudent, but it's a business decision and they have to be competitive. So that's the difference. One, they get permission, the other has to remain competitive. But if we believe that if AT&T, for example, did buy a pole, we're hoping and we think that it's cheaper to go underground than to go buy poles from Florida Power and to stay above ground. But we're not trying to impair contract rights or anything like that. So that was my only comment. I think there's a lot of, I don't see a whole lot of disagreement on the legality, at least on that. It's still policy issues, but we're going to take these comments to heart and see if there's any other changes that should be made.
Thank you, Niven. Any other commissioners want to say something?
The only thing I'll add is I think a couple things that have kind of come in light of our conversations. One is I do think it's relevant on what we pay for our internet costs and our communications now. And what that is comparable across the state. So that is a factor in how we proceed forward from this point. The other thing that's going to factor in, which I know that when we get to this point, we're working with FPL, is places where we still have Hurricane Michael damage legacy stuff. We're going to focus on that first. Because obviously our citizens don't want to see lines and poles in disrepair from 6 years ago. And so it's better for us to get to a point that we're proactive and we're working in a very expeditious manner to turn the page on what was to what is, so that we can really focus the majority of our efforts not on damaged product that's currently out there, but on places where it makes sense for storm resiliency moving forward. The last thing I would say, and I think this is for us to consider in future budget years, obviously, you're not undergrounding this year. We're not undergrounding this year. We have $1.5 million that's available to us. I think that you probably find some amicability inside the team to help and contribute to that. But that needs to come reflective in the costs that our consumers pay and in the service level that they're provided by going in undergrounding is with that. So I think what I'm hopeful is once we get this implemented, and in future meetings, we've actually got some framework for us to work with and make a plan, because we don't want to disrupt your business model. And we don't want disruption as a city either. So I think we're in the same spot with an understanding. But the future is undergrounding. And I think there's a method for us to get there and hopefully get there in a quick and expeditious fashion. And that may look like 10 years. That may look like 20 years. But in government, a month can sometimes take 2 years. And sometimes a meeting can go for 8 or 9 hours. So that's all I would say is I think this is the starting point. But as our attorney has said, this is building a framework for us to work from this point forward to creating a work program, both with FPL and with the other telecoms.
If Mrs. Barnes is still there, could she tell me when FP&L might begin this? Because I don't think we have any kind of idea. I certainly don't.
Well, actually, we're already doing, we're following, it's a state law, the Storm Secure and Undergrounding Protection Program. So we actually submit our plan to the PSC it's a 10-year plan. We develop a 10-year site plan. It's under review every 2 years with the Florida Public Service Commission. But I do have colleagues that are actually in the audience. And I'm not sure, I believe that David Jones may be there, and he actually works directly with that plan. And if he's there, he may be able to provide a little further insight as to where Panama City is on the list currently.
That's what I was kind of curious about. Where are we on the list to get started? I don't think it's happened already, or else I didn't see it. Everybody's here. I think they're pointing at you.
Come on down.
Okay.
Appreciate the opportunity as well to come speak to the staff. So as far as where we are with Bay County and the city, we do have several projects that are going on in the Callaway area at this time. Y'all may or may not be aware of. It's in Parker. Next year, and we've been in design and construction with an area in around Highland, which is in Cedar Grove. Portion of it is in the city limits that will be undergrounding, which is on 15th Street there between Sherman Avenue and Martin Luther King Boulevard. So that is inside the city limits. And of course, we have, multiple years of projects planned for Bay County, as well as we're also doing work in obviously the rest of our territories across the Panhandle. But this year we have slated and are executing undergrounding of 60 miles throughout our service territory, and a portion of that is in Bay County. So,
Thank you. So some is being actually done right here under my nose.
Do you mind?
Could you just affirm your name and title?
I'm sorry. I'm David Jones. I'm the lead project manager for the Northwest Region, Florida Power Alliance, SSUP program.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
David, when do you guys go before the Public Service Commission for your next work capital plan?
I would have to defer to Monica on that question.
Monica can answer that if she's got that. And I think what I understood from Telecom is you guys are done 2 years out as far as from your work capital plans. Is that but okay.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, David.
As far as when we're up in front of the PSC again, I will actually send you an email regarding that tomorrow.
Thank you, Mom.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. Would any member of the commission like to make a motion for adjournment? I think we've talked about all we can talk.
Second.
Do we have somebody to call the roll?
I will be glad to do that.
All right, call the roll. Thank you, Jonathan.
Commissioner Lucas? Commissioner Granger?
Yeah.
Commissioner Street?
Yes.
Mayor Rohan?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you for attending, and the meeting is now adjourned.